shit.
Need more time. I am hurt.
Go look out for that.
Not ready yet. You die. An incredible feat. Need more time. Needs more time. Your day comes. Need more time. Needs more time. I cannot do that. Not ready yet. Not ready yet. The spirit aid me. Need more time. The spirits aid me. Not ready yet. Need more time. Need more time. You are evil undoes you. The truth burns you. Not ready yet. Need more time.
The Rift Guardian is here.
Need more time.
You have triumphed. My name is Vex. When the chance you have a chance, I am skilled at clarifying dreams.
Oh, 2 hours full. It's hard keeping up 15 bonus fish. Oh shit, I missed the dies real quick.
Not ready yet. You are dead, come. Need more time. The spirits aid me. Not ready yet. My strike is true. Needs more time. Not ready yet. You die. Not ready yet. I strike at your heart. Need more time. Needs more time. Need more time. My strike is true. Needs more time. Not ready yet. My curse is on you. Needs more time. You die. You are evil and nonsense. Need more time. Not ready yet. spirit moves fast. Need more time.
Ah, too squishy.
It's perfect strike. Needs more time. I do not have enough mana. Not ready yet.
These enemies defy all reason.
Arrogant Nephilim. Arrogant Nephilim, my servants will feast on your pride as they devour your flesh.
I like how he dies before he even finishes what he says. Well, before he even starts what he says.
Your deeds have finished.
No way.
Can't roll crit damage on it. Crit chance. Wonder if it'll let me roll a mask drive.
Hello. What a steal.
I cannot afford that.
Guess not.
Need more time.
Stop coming after me.
Needs more time. Not ready yet. I am human. I need mana. Needs more time. Need more time. Not ready yet.
You wait here.
The dense cave will either be really good or really bad for me.
Needs more time.
think time-wise this is going to be pretty tight.
Needs more time. The spirit aid me.
I do love conduit pylons, but it's almost like cheating. Not ready yet. Need more time. Needs more time. I overflow vessels.
The Rift Guardian has found you.
Dude, that's fucking poison on, didn't it?
Not ready yet.
Motherfucker.
Heal me! I cannot do that.
I'm too squishy as poison, I might actually lose.
Need my hand. Heal me! I cannot do that.
Oh, motherfucker. I'm not gonna do it in time. I can't believe that. All because of the specific fucking guardian it is.
I must wait. I know that. Healing.
That's ridiculous. There's too much poison.
Not ready yet.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
Don't be shy. What a steal.
I cannot afford
I
that.
had that thing.
when we get lost in our own minds, you'll be keeping me near.
Actually, I'm not in the mood for the music.
That you get when you know someone is staring at you. You just have to look back. So I did. What I saw was Alice staring right at me with the strangest smile on her face. I say smile, but it wasn't a nice look. Teeth and gums in full view with a crazy look in her eyes. What the fuck was my initial reaction? Stuck the headphones on again and continued what I was doing, and Alice continued what she was doing too. After a good couple minutes, I removed the headphones and asked, "Anything in particular I can help you with? You want a request played or something?" Her reply will stay with me for the rest of my life. "No, I'm good, just showing you my teeth." Number 6. During my first year of college, my brother, who's 8 years older than me, lived about 2 blocks up the street from where my dorm was. This made it super easy to go over and hang out since we've always been close. Well, this particular night, Thursday I think it was, I decided to head home a little early and leave his place at about 11. I step outside onto the street and it is oddly empty. I can only see one other person in sight and he's directly across the street from me. He was making all sorts of weird guttural noises and wigging out, but this being in the city, I see that all the time. So I just head left and think about putting in my headphones to listen to some music. I'm goddamn glad I didn't, because the noise from the guy suddenly stops after I walked about 10 feet. The abrupt silence was unnerving and I looked back over at him. He had stopped moving and was staring directly at me. Then he made a fucking beeline across the street for me. I picked up my pace and looked back once I reached the end of the block. He was about 70 feet away now, just hobbling and running like some kind of zombie. So I freak out and start running back to the dorms with him in hot pursuit. And now he's making these slurping noises with his tongue and groaning. As I near the door to the dorm, I hope to God that my security card works on the first swipe, as it never usually does. I jumped the short 4 stairs and zipped my card as the guy is now about 25, maybe 30 feet away and still running. The card reader flashes green and I grab the door, rush inside and slam it back closed behind me. A group of students are just about to go out of the door, but I stop them and tell them to wait. The guy comes all the way up to the door and paces for a little bit outside before slinking back off into the darkness. The thing about him that scared me the most was whenever I looked back or when he was at the door, he had constant eye contact. I never want to see that hungry look in someone's eyes again. Maybe he just wanted my gum. Number 5. My brother came into town on business and invited me to bar hop on his expense account. I let my wife know not to wait up and met up with him once I got off work. We spent the night going from bar to bar, catching up on what had been going on in our lives until the last bar closed, maybe around 2 or 3 a.m. Then we stumbled back to his hotel room and passed out. I woke up the next morning around 7 a.m. and went home. My wife had already left, so I didn't see her. An hour or so later, she called me and asked where I had gone so early that morning. I was confused because I didn't get home until after she had left for work. I explained this to her and she got really scared. She explained that around 12:30 or 1 a.m. she heard a key in the front door and the door opening. She sat up in bed and saw a male figure come in who she assumed was me and go into the living room. She assumed that I had just decided to sleep on the couch rather than come into the room and risk waking her up. So she just rolled over and went back to sleep. A few hours later, around 5 or 6 a.m., she heard someone moving around downstairs again and then the front door opened, and she just watched the person leave and heard the door lock. She thought I was heading out and just rolled back over to sleep again. Number 4. A couple years ago, I had a night shift job at a supermarket. I usually got home at around 7 a.m., but on one night, my manager let me go early at 4 a.m. I got home and found that the screen door, to which I did not have a key to, was locked. It was kinda spooky being outside at that hour since my house is surrounded by dark woods. I called my mom and she came downstairs and let me in. She then proceeded to tell me that at about midnight my sister was downstairs alone watching TV with the lights on. She had gotten up to get something and she heard what sounded like a quick knocking on the door. She walked quietly to the door, waited, and heard the knocking again. She ran upstairs and told my parents, but my dad couldn't see anything outside. About a month later on the local news, we heard that 2 guys had been caught for a series of break-ins around our area and that they were knocking on doors in the middle of the night. What creeped us all out was the fact that these guys had to have been looking into the room my sister was in from the darkness, since the wall the TV is on is lined with 7-foot-tall windows all the way down. It still amazes me that my sister, knowing I come home at weird hours, didn't just open the door assuming. Number 3. So, this incident happened to my mom before she had me over 20 years ago. She worked at a local pub. The pub mainly catered for fishermen as the town is on the coast of Western Australia, so she knew most of the people who would come in for drinks or for some food. However, every now and again people from town would come in. She told me one guy used to come in who she'd known from house parties around the place and always wanted to talk to her while she was working, and she would say sorry and just keep doing her thing. One night she finished work at around midnight and walked home, which was a few kilometers away. She lived with a few housemates who were all guys, all good friends. When she got home from her shift, she decided to have a shower. Making her way back to her room, she realized her door was open, which is normally shut. All the guys were asleep, so she blew it off as wind or something. She laid down in bed to go to sleep, but something didn't feel right, and for reasons she can't explain to me, she felt the need to look under her bed. What she saw under the bed was the guy from the bar who had followed her all the way from her work. She tells me that she just stared at him for ages and he didn't move. He didn't even breathe, to the point she thought he was dead. She went out of the room calmly and went to one of the guys' rooms to tell them that she had a dead guy under her bed. They raced in with baseball bats to find the guy halfway out the window. He managed to escape and run away. The police were called, and because they all knew who he was, the cops picked him up the next day. The thing that bothers me the most is what his intentions were with my mom that night. Asshole got a fine and was never allowed back into town. Too soft in my opinion. Number 2. I was once going back to my dorm, which is off campus, by bus. The bus doesn't go directly to my dorm, so I have to walk a half mile to get home. One day I was coming home late, maybe 10:30 or 11, after hanging out with friends for the afternoon. It was late fall, so it was long dark by now. I usually walk home with one of my dorm mates, but she had decided to stay home that night. So I was walking alone after dark in definitely not the safest city in the world. I was a little under halfway there when I heard a scream from one of the back alleys. I think it's just a raccoon fight or something, as those sound much like human screams, until I hear it again. Another scream. Definitely human. I drop my bag behind a trash can and take off running towards the scream. I enter the alley to see a woman lying in the dirt. She turns to look at me, her face bloodied and swollen. She has a look of pure terror in her eyes. Her eyes widen and she glances behind me. I catch a flash of new, fresh fear in her eyes and she screams that he's right behind me. Without even thinking about it, I grab the lid off the trash can next to me and swing around, smashing a man at least 6 inches taller than me and 70 pounds heavier, clean in the head. He falls to the ground, knocked out. I see that an 8-inch knife with a huge blade falls from his hand. I called the cops and stayed with the woman until they arrived. I never saw either the man or the woman again. I take a taxi at night now. Number 1. My name is Ned. I am 33, soon to be 34 years old, and I'm the only child of Ted Bundy survivor Carol DeRanch. Her story takes place on November 8, 1974, in a Sears parking lot in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was out shopping when a man claiming to be a police officer approached her, saying that her car was stolen. He asked her to go with him in his car to the police station for questioning. Whilst they were driving, the man handcuffed her and tried to kidnap her. The problem was that the man, now known as Ted Bundy, had accidentally only cuffed one hand, leaving her free to escape by jumping out of the car. Ted frantically drove off. Unfortunately, later that night, another young woman named Deborah Kent, the same age as my mom at the time, 18, was raped and murdered by Bundy. My mother was present at his 1979 trial, becoming a damning piece of evidence against Bundy. Bundy was sentenced to death and executed in 1989, age 42. My mother has never forgotten the experience and was always adamant about keeping me safe as a kid, as she knew of the dangers of the world. She finally told me when I was 16, after I had seen a documentary on TV about Ted Bundy. She has moved on from the experience, but always has it in the back of her mind that you shouldn't trust anyone based on who they say they are.
Got an idea for a top 15 list? Submit it at top15s.net/submit. Be sure to subscribe. Number 15. My now ex-wife and I had just gotten married and moved into a new neighborhood. We moved in the winter, and as spring came, we noticed there were multiple dead animals, birds, squirrels, and raccoons in the yard. We cleaned them all up and started to do improvements to the outside of the house and painting on the inside. I started to notice strange things going on. Keys not where I left them, stuff like that, small. I thought I was just being forgetful. Then things slowly started to escalate. Well in bed, I could swear I could hear a barely audible conversation, like a radio in a far room. As soon as I would try to focus on it, it would go away. I started to hear footsteps at the other end of the house. One night, while laying in bed, I heard a huge crash, which woke me up out of dead sleep. I went into the kitchen and saw my kid's hamster cage on the floor about 15 feet from where it was. We put it on the fridge at night because we had a cat and didn't want it getting to it. Now I know what you are thinking, cat knocked it off. But this cage had to fly over a breakfast bar and a kitchen table to get to its resting place. Then things got ugly. I would be sitting at home watching TV, and I would have this uncontrollable thought, what would it be like to be possessed? Or, I want to be possessed. I couldn't get this thought out of my head. Couldn't concentrate on anything but that. I would literally have to say in my head, I love God, I love Jesus, over and over to get this original thought out of my head. I need to add that I am not a religious person. As soon as I would leave the house, I would be fine. Not one thought. But as soon as I pulled in the driveway, it would start up again. uncontrollably. I thought I was going crazy. I sat down with my wife and looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I think I am going crazy. I've been having weird thoughts." She turned white, and before I could say anything more, she said, "That you want to be possessed?" Come to find out, for the past month, she's been having the exact same thoughts. Then we started to compare stories. She told me that she was laying in bed without me. I worked nights at the time, and she could hear a man whispering through the baby monitor while our child was fussing. Needless to say, we moved out within the month. Her oldest daughter was still in school, and we had moved across town. I had to pick her up at that house on my days off when she got dropped off by the bus. As soon as I turned the corner, I would get those thoughts. I would sit in my car in the driveway and not even go inside and wait. Number 14. My friend's dad is an ex-Marine. He has been a paramedic, firefighter, and security guard, so there's practically nothing on earth that can frighten this motherfucker. His family used to live in a very old house built in the 1800s. One day, my friend's dad was at home alone, waiting for the rest of the family to get back with dinner. Now this man is the most honest man that I have ever met. There would be no reason to lie about this. He was sitting on the couch downstairs when he says he heard footsteps coming from upstairs. He walks down the main hallway and looks up to the banister for the upstairs hallway. He then said that there was a shadowy figure that glided across the upstairs railing from one side to the other until it was out of view. Right after he saw the supposed apparition, he heard the loudest, most blood-curdling scream he had ever heard in his life. Immediately after the scream, all of the lights in the house went out and he found himself standing in the pitch black. He then ran out to the front porch and waited for the rest of the family to return. My buddy said that when they got back, he remembers the horrified look on his dad's face. He said he had never seen that look on him and has never seen it since. Number 13. My nephew lives with me in an old farmhouse built in the 1840s. When he was about 4, maybe 5, he told me that there was a little boy named Charlie who lived in our house. He said Charlie had never heard of video games and that Charlie's dad left him home all by himself. This was around the same time he had an imaginary friend named Mr. Cat, so I wrote it off. A couple of weeks later, I was shaving with the bathroom door open and thought I could see my nephew kind of looking in at me out of the corner of my eye. I stuck my head around and could see him from behind messing with an old china cabinet we keep important stuff in, and just as I walked into the room, I could see my nephew sitting in the living room watching TV. He couldn't have crossed that much distance that fast or silently. I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, that was Charlie." He said there's a really super book in there from when you were a little boy. And at the bottom of the stack of old documents and stuff in the china cabinet is a book I got as a gift when I was a kid. I didn't know it was there. It was under 2 boxes of documents and couldn't be seen until the boxes were lifted out. The little boy wasn't transparent, he didn't float, he didn't look spooky, he just looked like a kid. Number 12. My dad once told me a story about one of his cousins. The cousin used to live with his family in an apartment building. On the floor above them lived an old widowed woman whose young son, around 24 or 25, served in the Indian Army and had died during a bomb attack somewhere in North India. A few weeks after the funeral, my uncle started having dreams about the son who had died. He would tell my dad and his mom that the son keeps knocking on the door in the dream and just stands there once the door is opened. He had the same dream for 2 weeks straight until one night before dinner, he opened his front door to go down to the lobby and saw the son standing in front of him. He quickly shut the door. freaked out for a few minutes behind the door and opened it to still find the son standing there. I'm not sure what happened right after, but my uncle then started seeing the sun inside his apartment, and then one day it just stopped. Number 11. I have a co-worker, male, aged 45, who is a no-nonsense sort of fellow. He doesn't hold much with silliness and doesn't believe in ghosts. So he and I both work at a very fancy antique business. Our boss is a third-generation dealer. His personal collection rivals the best in the world. Because of this, when he goes away, he doesn't just have a security system, but a house sitter as well. The job of house sitter almost always falls to my coworker. The house is located in rural Connecticut. It is a circa 1780 center chimney colonial. It was originally built by a prominent and wealthy family in this corner of the state. The house has a couple dark and ominous, fully substantiated stories attached to it. The one that is most relevant to this story, however, relates to a young son of a family who lived in this house circa 1820. During his late teens, he developed a mental illness. Based on the stories surrounding him, one could assume it might have been schizophrenia. Anyway, the family, not knowing what to do with their violent and unpredictable son, locked him in an upstairs bedroom and fed him through a hole that was cut in the wall. The patched hole is still clearly visible, as are the deep gouges in the wood paneling of the room, supposedly the result of his assaults on his surroundings. After a few years, the son managed to hang himself in the room. Last winter, when my coworker was house sitting at night, he came into the shop one morning as white as a sheet, clearly shaken up and exhausted. He proceeded to relate to me his experiences from the previous evening. He had been sitting downstairs in the keeping room at about 10 p.m. watching TV. He started hearing strange sounds coming from upstairs, movement and shuffling. He turned the TV off so he could listen better. The movements continued for about 30 seconds while he listened. He decided a bat must have gotten into the house, not uncommon in an 18th century building. As he climbed the back staircase to investigate, he distinctly heard a man's laughter coming from the bedroom at the top left of the staircase, the bedroom where the son had been imprisoned and committed suicide. He said all the hairs stood up on the backs of his arms. He describes the laugh as not good, not happy. At this point, he lost all desire to investigate further, scurried back down the stairs, and poured himself a tequila and water, which he slowly sipped while listening to the occasional shuffle or bump from the bedroom. He slept downstairs on the couch that night. Number 10. My grandpa on my mom's side died way before I was born. At the time of his death, my parents had 3 children. A night soon after the death of my grandpa, my mom and dad were in their room lying in bed, and she was crying to him when she said, "Who's gonna take Dustin, my oldest brother, fishing now?" Immediately after this happened, they heard a sound of glass breaking coming from outside their bedroom door. My dad grabs his shotgun and leaves the bedroom to check things out. When he steps out of his room, he notices a picture frame lying face down on the floor. This picture frame was supposed to be above the fireplace, about 20 feet away from his bedroom door. He picks it up, and it's a picture of my brother and my grandpa fishing. He put the house up for sale the next day. Number 9. My dad's side has stories. He used to tell me stories of his old house where he grew up. There are a couple of stories he told me, and they were also backed up by his mom and brothers when I asked them about it. Apparently, stuff happened to them too. Story goes that he was around 10 and home by himself reading comics in his room. As he was reading, he started to hear footsteps coming from the kitchen area. He was about to go and see if it was his brothers or parents coming home. but he got stopped dead in his tracks when he got an overwhelming sense of fear. As he was debating on whether or not to go, he started hearing what sounded like large, heavy coins dropping into a bucket full of more coins. This went on for less than a minute. He was torn between wanting to go out and see what the sound was, and between being scared to shit. He ended up sitting in his room until he heard his dad drive up. There were a couple other stories they told me about the house. Strange noises, dishes falling out of cupboards, shadows running around outside, a lot of crazy other stories. I never was allowed to stay with my grandma at the house by myself, and always got a really weird feeling when I would be by myself in their back room. Always got a feeling like there was someone there with me. Supposedly it was haunted. The man who lived there before had been in World War II, and upon his return committed suicide in one of the rooms. My grandfather, strangely enough, committed suicide in the backyard of the same house. My mom lived in the same house with my dad when they were first married. At the time, my dad's brother and mom still lived there as well. My mom told me how one time she was sitting in my dad's old room and heard my dad's brother drive up the driveway, open the front door, and head into his room to start lifting weights. She heard the weights clank together for a good couple of minutes before she decided to go outside. Everyone else was out of the house at the time, and she thought he was the first to come back home. But once she opened the door, the weight stopped. She went to talk to my dad's brother, but there was no one in the room and no car in the driveway. As she was standing there, trying to figure out what she had heard, she said she saw my uncle's car drive up. The other was again when my dad was a kid. He was laying in bed sleeping when he saw his other door open and a figure that looked like his mother come in and sat on the bed with him. It was pretty dark, so he could only make out the outline of the body. He fell back asleep. In the morning, he asked his mom why she came in like that. She told him that she didn't go into his room. The creepier part to this story is fast forwarding to when I was young. My brother got up one morning to get some water. When he walked out to the kitchen, he saw what looked like my mom sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee. He went and sat at the table too in the dark and started talking to my mom. She did not reply. This goes on for another minute or so, and my brother decides that he's tired and that her mom is still half asleep as well. So he starts to go back to his room, and as he does, our parents' bedroom opens and my mom walks out. Now my brother, creeped out as fuck, turns back to look at the table and does not see anyone there anymore. After that, he refused to get up by himself, never told our parents why. Oh, and to add to the weirdness, my dad committed suicide around 8 years back as well, shot himself under a bridge. Number 8. I had a good friend die when I was 10. We'll call him John. He died pretty tragically too. He was hit by a car literally right in front of my house when he was chasing down a ball that bounced into the road. Fast forward 7 years. I'm babysitting my little sister and she is playing outside. I'm on the porch swing reading and she's shooting hoops on her little Tykes hoop. The ball bounces onto the road and I look up to see her yell, "Don't go after that ball, John." Freaked the shit out of me. She never knew about John. I asked her who John was and she said it was a kid that would play with her sometimes outside. Number 7. When I was a kid, I did yard work for this incredibly lovely old couple. They told me that when they moved into their house, they had to empty out a few of the rooms and closets of the previous owner's stuff. After that, they heard bumping sounds like someone wandering around the house in the dark. They called the previous owners to ask if the sounds were a normal thing. "Oh, you emptied out the upstairs closet, didn't you? Just put the cane back in the closet so he can see where he's going." Without it, he just stumbles around bumping into things and making noise. They put the cane back and the noises stopped. They left it in that closet for over 30 years until they moved out. I was helping them clear the house when I saw this cane. It was a pretty normal wooden cane with a rubber knot on it, but it had these scorch marks on the end like someone used it to poke out a fire. Then they gave me it. Number 6. Okay, let me start by saying I've never experienced a single paranormal experience in all my 28 years but this one. It happened last year and it still haunts me. The fact it is so incredibly intense and real makes it so much more crazy. I literally start shaking when I think of it. I've only told 3 or 4 people. Here it goes. Was sleeping next to my girlfriend, now wife. She gets up and starts walking around the room with the lights off. About 5 minutes later, she gets back in bed. A few minutes later, I feel strange and look over at my wife. She's sitting straight up. I turn on the light and ask her what's wrong. I get no answer, no acknowledgement, except she starts to kind of breathe loudly. I say her name a few more times and get very little back from her. I start to shake her. I'm really scared she's having a stroke or something, and say her name over and over and over. She finally looks at me and gets this sneer on her face that really freaks me the fuck out. This is the point where I really start to feel like something is really off. I start to say, "What's your name?" as though I'm talking to someone who just hit their head. In other words, I'm trying to ask her to remember her name, to try to draw her out of whatever has her head in the fog. I ask her a few more times, looking in her eyes, when all of a sudden, her pupils dilate to the point where they are black. I mean fast too, like from normal to black in a split second. Right after this happens, she says, "The devil." It comes out of her in this voice that is not hers. I freak the fuck out, grab her and start praying, like really praying, commanding God to get whatever the fuck has just taken over my wife to get out. About 15 seconds or so, my wife starts crying. I pull back a little, and she just says my name in this terrified, confused little animal voice. I hold her for a few minutes, then we talk for a few minutes. She basically says she just felt blackness for a while. She remembers coming to in my arms, that's it. So I'm not even that spiritual of a person, or at least I wasn't until that clusterfuck of a mind-altering night. It all happened so fast. I still don't know what really happened, but not a single part of me thinks there's some non-spiritual explanation for it. My wife has never had another experience like that, and I've never had another paranormal experience of any kind. My brother thinks that she just had a mini stroke or something, and from the outside, I would surely say the same thing. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well for a while, but as nothing has happened since, my life is entirely back to normal. Number 5. My parents were on their honeymoon to Key West. When they arrived at the hotel to check in, they were told that their room would be non-smoking. With my dad being a smoker, they requested a different room. They got the room switch and went to their room. As they got off the elevator, the smell of fresh paint was overwhelming. Down the hall, there was a painter with all of the necessary supplies laid out around him and was painting the wall. As my parents walked past him, they casually greeted him, and the painter had absolutely no acknowledgement of their presence. Whatever. When they got to their room, the smell of paint was even worse in there. So bad it wasn't even bearable, so they decided to go to the front desk to change rooms. When they explained the situation, the attendant looked very confused and informed them that there wasn't a scheduled paint job on that floor for the day, but agreed to change their room. My parents go back to their floor to grab their luggage, and the painter is completely gone. All supplies cleaned up and gone within 10 minutes, and the smell of paint was completely gone too. At this point, my parents were really freaked out, but didn't think much of it and went to their new room. The next morning, on their way to breakfast, they overhear a tour guide talking to a group. My parents tuned in when the guide mentioned the floor they were originally supposed to stay on. Apparently, a long time ago, there was a painter on that floor painting and fell down the elevator shaft to his death. Now my parents don't normally believe in the paranormal, but after an event like this, they had no explanation for it, and it freaked them out for a good bit. Number 4. When I was 17, I went to my mate's house for some beers on his birthday. I probably only had about 5 drinks. Come the early hours of the morning, probably around 2 or 3 a.m., I head out to the kitchen for a drink. I pour a drink of water and turn around and take a big sip. As I'm swallowing, I swear I hear footsteps. The ground in the entire room is all made up of tiles, so I hold my drink down and listen for a few seconds. Next thing I know, I hear fast footsteps in front of me, running towards me, and suddenly a huge cold breeze blew right through me. At that point, I just freaked out and ran back for the bedroom. I ended up waking my friend up and telling him what happened, and we listened and we could hear odd bangs and bumps from out there, but nothing out of the ordinary after that ever happened. I still always remember it though. Gives me goosebumps telling this. Number 3. My brother was getting to sleep one night when he was about 13 or 14. The lights were off, doors closed. He was settled with his eyes closed. All of a sudden, that feeling that he's being watched by someone. The feeling becomes stronger and stronger, so he pulls the covers over his head, curls into a ball, trying not to freak out. He even starts saying the Our Father prayer. When a few lines in, he hears a voice right next to his ear say, "That's not gonna help you." He bolted out of the bed, down to the hallway, turned on all the lights, and sat on the stairs for the entire night. Number 2. This was the early 80s, and my sister lived in Toronto. One day, she decided to come down and see some old friends and visit with our parents, who live in a rural area. She stayed late and left around 9 p.m. This was late fall, so it was nearly pitch black. But about 8 miles into the drive back to town, the car she borrowed broke down. Luckily, she broke down in front of the house. They let her use their phone to call Dad to come pick her up. After he came down, the people let her park her car in the driveway until the next day. It was about 10 p.m. when they started driving back to my parents. She decided to stay the night after this. They went through a wooded area, trees as far as the eye could see on both sides, when suddenly they hear this incredibly loud, inhuman scream that was louder than the car, even louder than the fucking radio. Dad slams on the brakes, and they were like, "What the fuck was that?" When suddenly something appeared on the side of the road. It was a fucking coyote, only it was 6 feet tall, and walking upright on its hind legs. It crosses in front of the car and went to the other side of the road, and that same scream happened again, only 10 times louder than before. Dad slammed on the accelerator and got the fuck out of there. He only told me this once, but the look on his face when he told me, and knowing the kind of guy he is, I believe him. Number 1. It started when I got my Ouija board, and I never read the rules. My friends were too chicken shit, so I did it alone. I talked to 2 people that day by myself. One was a little boy named Tim, who was disowned by his parents and died in the forest. The other presence was much darker, and for 2 questions I asked, they would reply death, which was not a valid answer. I got angry with the second one and yelled at it to prove its malicious nature to me. Nothing happened. I packed the board away, feeling as if maybe it was me the whole time, which is the common notion for disbelievers. But then the next 2 months happened. Between 3 and 4 a.m., I consistently woke up with terror sweats
He
and
believes
felt as if I was
Ouija
being
board
watched.
is talking to an
About
actual
50
ghost.
days in, I awoke to the most
And the
horrid
first thing he
screaming
does
and a
is try and
thud so loud I
piss off
thought
a bad
someone was
one.
breaking in. I jumped
just
up
not smart.
and felt again like someone was in front of me wanting me to die, and yet no sounds from my upstairs housemates. I got so scared that I quit sleeping at night. I would stay up until 6 a.m. at least to make sure that the ghost hour wouldn't affect me, but it came anyways. I'll always remember what happened at 2 months. I was playing COD, as typical for the past 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, I got this cold chill on my back, and it went to my left shoulder, and then also onto the left side of my head. And I shit you not, I heard breathing in my ear. The pressure on my upper left side was if someone or something was leaning its head onto my shoulder. I was frightened to death, but I decided fuck this. I got up, swung my fist, and screamed, "Fuck off and go away." And after that night, it seemed to stay away. I don't know how all this happened, especially when I was such a non-believer. Those months felt like a dream, but I do believe now that certain energies do manifest us, and it's best to stay away from the evil, hurtful ones. Got an idea for a top 15 list? Be sure to leave it in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching. Number 15. My girlfriend had always told me her house was haunted. I'd always hear creaks and stuff upstairs, and the occasional footstep, but I always played it off as normal house noises until one night in August of this year. We were downstairs watching TV like usual, about to go to bed, when we both got a really weird feeling almost simultaneously. She gave me a weird look, and I didn't think anything of it, so we went to bed. After a few minutes of her on Twitter and me on Reddit, we put our phones down and roll over to go to sleep. Then we both heard the words, "Good night," in a child's voice. Doesn't seem too strange, right? Well, considering that there were no children in the house, we both looked at each other like, why would you say goodnight like that? Then we realized neither of us had said it, and we left our room fairly quickly. We went downstairs to lay on the couch and watch a little TV and come to our senses, figure out where those words could have come from. Then we both got that someone's watching you feeling. Not like, oh, that dude over there has been staring at me, but something will not take their eyes off me no matter what I do feeling. So we decided it's best to leave the house. We went to walk to our front door, but right as we were about to open it, we heard the child's voice again. This time it came from the balcony above us in the entryway. Clear as day, a child said, "Mommy and Daddy." We looked at each other. I may or may not have screamed, and we ran to my car and decided to drive to the one place that was open in our shitty small Oregon town, Walmart. The problem was, as soon as we got in the car, we knew something had come with us, and it was pissed at us for leaving. The second we got into my Honda, there was nothing but the feeling of hate instilled into both of us for no reason whatsoever. Whatever it was filled that car with hate. It's now about 4 a.m. and I have to be at work in 5 hours, so we decide to go back to her house and try to get some sleep and see what happens. We walk into the front door and nothing but quiet. We walk up the stairs, turn right, and suddenly it sounds like a dog is growling from her upstairs bathroom. It takes me a second though, because I grew up with dogs, and all I could think was that it was just mine being weird. 5 seconds later I realize I'm at her house, and no dog has ever set paw in there. Something was fucking growling at me, and I had no idea what. At this point, I'm fucking pissed at whatever is happening because I'm tired and need to go to sleep for work. So I come up with this brilliant plan of talking shit to whatever was causing all these problems. The only thing that sticks out at this point is me yelling, "If you're so pissed off, do something about it." Right after that, I feel something pull my shirt. I turn around thinking my girlfriend is playing a very unfunny joke on me, but no, she was downstairs. Something pulled my shirt. After that, I decided it was time to leave for the night. At 6 a.m., we get in my car and drive for my mom's house. That car ride was much less hate-filled, and all the bad feelings were gone for a while. I went to work while my girlfriend slept at my mom's place, and when I got off, we went back to her house to check things. Everything seemed fine, except for one picture of us she had hanging on her wall was knocked to the ground like something out of a fucking horror movie. She was too exhausted to care about my safety at that point, and I was so tired I was willing to let whatever was there kill us so I could just get some rest. 2 weeks later, we moved out and haven't had any problems since. I never believed in the paranormal at all until this happened. I still question it. My brain thinks there has to be a logical explanation to all of it, and I'm sure there is. But I know she believes, and a piece of me believes, that there's something else in that house. Number 14. From 3 until 13, I lived in a nice home out near Yosemite National Park. Nothing super spectacular about it. 4 bedrooms, a den, dining room, the norm. Just down a little dirt road, and if you've ever been around these parts, you'll know. Just a little dirt road, and if you've ever been around these parts, you'll know. Miles away from civilization. My whole childhood, I was visited by this girl in white. She never spoke. I would just wake up at night and see or feel her there. I asked my dad, and his response every time was, "The men in our family can see ghosts." My rational thinking of this was that we all had some sort of mild schizophrenia running through our family. It didn't bother me. She didn't look like other people. There was just something off about her. After my dad died, my mother decided to sell the house and went through a realtor. We never once had contact with the buyers, only knew them by name. The buyers had a son who went to the same school as our old neighbors, dear friends of the family, and the son apparently came to school without sleep repeatedly, complaining there was a girl who watched him all night and that he needed to get out. Number 13. So I get home from my job as a server at midnight. One of my roommates was in the Navy and was deployed at the time, and the other one was at his girlfriend's house. I cook myself dinner, and as I'm cooking, my dog starts growling and barking towards the middle of the room at nothing. This is especially weird because she never ever barks. She was a rescue, and I brought her as a sense of security when I'm home alone, and I could never get her to bark at anyone. I dismiss her barking as odd, but I finish cooking and eat. I start to clean and turn the sink on because it takes forever to get hot, but right when I turned around, the sink turned off on its own. Again, I think it's odd, but I don't think it's worth freaking out over. The hair on the back of my dog is standing up straight, but no one is home, and it's midnight, so I'd figure I'd just tough it out, even though I was beginning to get a little spooked. After cleaning, I go into the bathroom. My bathroom was small, with the sink immediately to your right as you enter, with the toilet next to it, bathtub at the end, and toilet paper dispenser directly across the toilet. So I was sitting on the sink, and the toilet paper dispenser was right behind me. After 2 to 3 minutes, I hear a weird noise behind me, so I turn around, and I shit you not, the whole roll of toilet paper was unraveling fast as fuck, like someone was pulling it. I noped the fuck out of the bathroom. The door was closed and it had no windows, so it couldn't have been a breeze. I put a leash on my dog and run out of that apartment faster than Usain Bolt. By the time this happened, it was already about 2 a.m. None of my friends were awake, so I spent the night sitting outside the door of my apartment. When I get back in the next morning, the whole roll of toilet paper was on the ground, and the roll was probably 3/4 full. I'm talking a good 5 to 10 meters of toilet paper. After that day, I've never had an odd experience quite like that one ever again. But one of my roommates did mention that a few times he'd come home and find every door and cabinet in the place open when he'd specifically remember closing them and leaving them that way when he left. Number 12. A friend of mine was taking a picture of herself and her daughter kissing, and in the background you can clearly see a figure that was not there. She had ghost experts come in and check around the house and found nothing. After some research, they found one of the previous owners was a mortician or ran a funeral home or something. I have known this girl for years, and it would completely shock me if this was fabricated, as I saw how upset she was and the money she dished out for experts. They no longer lived there. Number 11. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, my uncle had just visited from the Philippines, showing us a doll that sang the Itsy Bitsy Spider when he pressed a button on her. He had brought it with the intention that one of my girl cousins might want it, but in all honesty, we all thought the doll was creepy, especially since it sang the song in a slow, ominous manner. Not knowing what to do with it, we took out the batteries and threw it back in the box that my uncle had put it in right after we left the room. All we heard was a muffled, "The itsy bitsy spider came up the water spout." The doll was singing with no fucking batteries. No one was in the room at the time, which means that no one could have replaced the batteries, nor pressed the button on her hand. Number 10. I have a ghost that occasionally visits me in my sleep and tells me things that are either about to happen or things that people are hiding from me. It's a female, and from the looks of what she's wearing, she is either from the 30s or 40s. A few things I can recall off the top of my head. When I was in high school, she told me that one of my friends was going to break his leg playing a sport he usually doesn't. The next day, this happened. She told me that a girl I had a crush on was going to give me her number. It happened 2 days later. She told me when both of my dogs were going to die. She now also shows their spirits to me. They haven't left the house, and they act the same as if they were alive. Now the creepiest one for me is that about 3 months ago, she told me that I was missing a female figure in my life. I questioned her, saying that if I should be married or something, and she laughed and said it was family, and that I should ask my mother. I asked my mother about this, and it turns out she had a miscarriage about 2 years before she had me. It was supposed to be a girl. Number 9. One night when I was 10, I was asleep in bed and was woken up by my bedroom door opening and someone sitting on my bed. I felt the graze on my leg and the bed sink as they sat, thinking it was just my mom having something to tell me. I opened my eyes only to see a pale, eyeless boy who seemed to be my age sitting at the foot of my bed with his legs crossed, staring at me or facing my direction. Since he had no eyes, he then reached his hand towards me, and he was holding what looked like a little black box. I freaked out, but as I reached to grab it, he hesitantly pulled back. I reached out further for it, and to give it. As I did so, I blinked, and by the time I reopened my eyes, he was gone. The spot of the bed where he was sitting lifted back into place, but the imprint of someone sitting there was still present. I told my mom in the morning, and she was slightly freaked out, but assured me I was just dreaming. Fast forward 5 years. I had my girlfriend over to do homework. After homework, she took a nap while she waited for her parents to pick her up. When they arrived, I tried waking her to let her know. I nudged her as she opened her eyes so sudden, already looking in the direction of the corner of the room where the walls meet the ceiling. Lifting her finger and pointed. As fast as she woke, she fell asleep again. I attempted to wake her again. She came to full consciousness, and I asked her what the hell that was about, and explained what she just did. She said, "Oh, I thought I was dreaming, but up on the wall I saw a little boy with no eyes, just there in a Spider-Man pose staring at me." That's when I freaked out and told her the story for the first time, of when I saw what I guessed was the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years, still with the same girlfriend, and by this time we had a 2-year-old daughter. We were living in my old bedroom at my parents' house. My daughter would wake up at the same time every night and start talking. For a while we thought it was just a normal baby thing, until I noticed it was almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her one night who she was talking to every night. She responded, "A little boy. He talks to me. He's nice. He's lost and looking for his mommy." I told my mom what happened the next morning, and before I got to tell her what I thought, she said, "I remember when that happened to you, then your girlfriend. I have no idea what that is." By then, neither my girlfriend or I have seen the little boy after our first encounter, but my daughter continued her nightly conversations until we got our own place later that year. Number 8. My great-grandmother lived with my family at our old house. We had built an addition onto the house so she could have her own kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, etc. After her death, we boxed up her belongings, which included her Bible and various other books and knickknacks, and I ended up moving into that addition since I was the oldest kid still living at home. After a month or so after she died, I was home alone. I had just gotten home from school and decided to watch TV in the family room. I settled down, turned on the TV, and proceeded to chow down on a bag of chips. An hour or so goes by, and I hear what sounded like a door slamming in the addition. My first instinct was to see if my brother was at home without my knowledge, since he had a bad habit of slamming doors. I started down the hall towards his room. I never had the chance to open his door. Further down the hall, in the addition, I saw a person head directly towards my bedroom. It was at this point that I had to fight the incredible urge to shit my pants. I knew there was an axe murderer in the house, and it was going to be up to me to stop him. I entered my brother's room and grabbed the first weapon I could find, a plastic lightsaber. I slowly crept towards the addition. The closer I got, the colder the air felt around me. It was the strangest feeling ever. I slowly entered my room and saw nothing. I had seen enough movies to know that the axe murderer was in one of two places, either under my bed or in my closet. I checked under the bed first. Nothing. I then flung open the closet, fully expecting an epic axe versus lightsaber battle, but was thankfully disappointed. I began to creep around the addition, looking for signs of a break-in. I found nothing along those lines, but what I did find creeps me the hell out to this day. On my great-grandmother's couch, the couch she sat on every day that I can remember, I found her open Bible, the same Bible that had been boxed up a few weeks earlier. Number 7. To sum it up, there's a legend about a woman who hung herself from a poinciana tree after being raped by a Japanese fisherman after discovering that she was pregnant. Thus, she is called the Poinciana woman. Anyway, she is said to be situated around the army base we have here. So one night, my eldest sister, brother, and their partners decided to go to the army tunnels, break in, and have a sesh. They didn't stay for very long, because once they were in, they said they had heard footsteps and ran out thinking it was a security guard. They arrived home at around 11 p.m. and went to sleep. My mother, little brother, and I were still awake, however. Mom was drunk, playing music loud from the TV. I was on the family computer in the lounge room, and my brother was getting ready to go to bed. Suddenly, he had ran out into the lounge room and was screaming, "Can you hear that?" Of course we couldn't hear what he was referring to, so we muted the TV, and we went up against the window with our ears pressed, trying to listen to whatever he was talking about. There was a light moan coming from outside the window. It sounded feminine. It was just outside of the window we were at. It circled around the house. You could hear it coming from the window opposite to the one we were at, and then the door on the side. It began getting louder and louder and louder. The wind literally picked up, and it was hurtling around with the sound. It got so loud and dramatic that my brother and I were on the ground with our ears covered, crying and screaming. We have spoken about this after the incident. We both recall being able to hear the sound at the exact same volume, even with our ears covered, almost as if it was in our heads. This went on for about 5 or 10 minutes, when suddenly it just stopped. It was silent, and there was no wind outside. Mom was there with us and recalls nothing happening. She didn't hear a thing. It was only after we moved out of that house, years later, we realized that there was a poinciana tree outside of that window. Number 6. My first home I was born and raised in always felt like something to call home during the day, but at night, it seemed like there was always something around the corner or behind you. I felt it, my cousins felt it, and my parents always ignored it. Weird stuff would always happen, like doors opening and slamming themselves, waking me up. But that wasn't the least of my concerns. One time at night, I was reading a book while laying down on my floor with half of my body in my closet. I don't know why, and the power went off. Immediately chills ran down my spine. Almost a second later, I hear a deep-toned growling right behind me and ran crying to my mom, knocking over a lot of stuff. It was pitch black. She yelled at me when the lights turned on and didn't believe me. I begged her to let me sleep with her that night. I just didn't feel safe at all in that fucking room. I had no other choice but to just try to think it was all my imagination and sleep in there anyways. I woke up to my head hitting my bed frame and my right leg being dragged into my closet. God fucking damn, I'm getting chills just remembering this. I knew someone was in there and wanted me to look at it, but I didn't. I screamed my lungs out and ran straight to my mom and cried all night telling her what happened. She got mad at me for waking her up and being a girl. My family is rather tough, I guess you can say. That night, I slept at the foot of her bed, shaking, trying to only look towards my mother, because I just had this haunting feeling of someone or something standing right behind me, just staring. A bunch of other stuff happened in that house, but that was by far the most terrifying thing that ever happened to me. Number 5. I've suffered from insomnia as far back as I can remember. I was in the 2nd grade, and it was early in the morning. I think around 5 or so. I had a little TV on my nightstand, and was definitely watching Lord of the Rings on VHS. I had the volume up super loud because my ceiling fan always made a ruckus throughout the night. I was super into the movie when all of a sudden, all the sound around me starts to slowly fade away. I remember I became confused and reached to turn my TV up thinking it had broke, but then I realized the sound of the fan had faded with it. The only way I can describe it is comparing it to something turning the volume down on a car radio. I was suddenly overwhelmed by an intense feeling of euphoria. I had never experienced anything like it. I absolutely cannot describe how utterly at peace I felt. I was able to comprehend what was happening, and then it clicked in my head that I was dying. Keep in mind that I'm in the 2nd grade, so this is a pretty intense conclusion, but I just knew. I rolled over onto my back, ready to, and excited to accept my fate. That's when I saw it. There was a large white figure in my doorway, just hovering and pulsating a white aura. I quickly panicked and began calling out for my brother. His room was across the hall. The figure glided to the end of my bed and just sat there, watching. I'm not really sure how much time passed, but the figure suddenly vanished. Sound came back, and the euphoria disappeared. I jumped out of bed and ran into my brother's room, where I practically flew into his bed. He woke up and saw how panicked I was, and he began to panic as well. I was hysterical and just kept telling him it was a ghost. We did what any other kids would do and hide under his covers. After a while, we got anxious, and I bravely made a peephole in the blanket to check the time on the clock, hoping it would be daylight soon. 5:30. The clock read 5:30 in the morning. Then the phone rang, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang. Me and my brother started to panic even more. Then silence. Once again, it began to ring, and ring, and ring. We jumped out of bed and took turns running from light switch to light switch until we had a light path to the living room. Our house was over 5,000 square feet. This was not an easy task. We got to the living room and watched cartoons until my mom woke up. She was livid, yelling at us for being up so early. I told her I saw a ghost, which only made her more upset. My brother, who was always tormenting my irrational fears, got mad at her and started telling her this wasn't a joke and it wasn't my imagination. I started telling her to check the phone because I saw the ghost around 5:30 and it must have been the ghost calling. Kid logic. She went to check the phone and went to the other room for a while. Suddenly she wasn't upset anymore. When we asked if it was said ghost, she said it was a telemarketer. She was so nice about it, she let me sleep in her room the next few days. I thought maybe since it was my brother's birthday that day, she just didn't want to argue, but she never let me sleep in her room. 2 days later, after getting home from school, my mom called me to the family room and told me to sit on her lap and that she needed to tell me something. I obliged. My great-grandma passed away in the hospital at 5:30 a.m., and the phone calls are my grandma calling to notify us. Me and my great-grandma were extremely close. To this day, I get chills thinking about it. I know that there are a few ways to explain the occurrence, but I know for a fact that it was 100% a paranormal experience. My mom and brother still back me up on it to this day. Number 4. My mom was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer in 2009. It was a struggle, and the doctors didn't expect her to pull through, but she did like a champ. My mom is a fighter, and as she puts it, refused to let cancer kick her ass. Fast forward to 2012, and she decided to undergo reconstructive surgery. The surgery goes well and she is put into recovery. She spends a day drifting in and out of consciousness, which was expected after a surgery like that. The whole time she is hooked up to a morphine drip to help her pain. After being reassured by the doctors that everything was fine, we decided to go to our homes and shower and sleep. My sister elects to stay just in case anything goes down. Fast forward to the next morning, and my sister is calling me in tears saying that I have to get to the hospital right now. I rush up to the hospital and am pulled aside by doctors, telling me that my mom had suffered some complications from the surgery and is in a coma. A half an hour goes by, my stepdad arrives, and the doctors pull him and I into a room. They say her lungs are filling with fluids at a fast rate. They say she is unlikely to recover, and we need to make a decision to keep her on life support or pull the plug. We refuse to let her go like that. 3 days go by, and my mom starts showing some cognitive activity. By the end of the week, she fully wakes up. The relevant part happens after she wakes up. She looks at my stepdad and I and asks when we came into the room. We told her we've been here all week. She seems really dumbfounded by this and replies that she's only been in the room for a day or two. She then asks where her grandmother had gone. This creeped us out. My great-grandmother passed away in early 2007. When my stepdad tried to explain this to her, she replied that she spent the last couple of days with her talking about the family. She said grandma got really weird and told her that she can't give up because she has children to take care of. According to my mom, around the time that she said this, my mom became aware of us being in the room and her grandma was gone. It was really weird to talk to her about it. To this day, she has no recollection of being in the coma. She knows that she was now, but all she can remember is spending a few days in the hospital with her grandmother, talking about the family. Number 3, we moved into a house and everything was really quiet the first 6 months or so. The neighbors told us the people that lived there before had moved after their teenage son died in a motorcycle accident. Then after the first 6 months, my dad died, not in the house, but after that, stuff started to happen. I would have friends sleep over, and one night my friend woke me up because she said there was a young guy standing in the bathroom. So I went and checked and nothing was there. Over the next few years, just about any friends that stayed overnight had said they saw the tall, blonde young guy walking around the house. We did have a few other things happen, like a wine glass that was on the counter suddenly shattered. No one was touching it, it just shattered on the counter. Another time during the winter, we had the heater on and my room was always the warmest in the house, and it was ice cold as you walked across my bedroom to the bathroom that was connected. The creepiest thing was when my friend was sleeping on the couch, and in the middle of the night, he said he woke up to a young guy pushing him off onto the floor. He said the guy didn't say anything, but my friend knew at the time he had to leave, and he did. He wouldn't stay at my place after that. Number 2. So I was about 9 or 10. I went to my friend Allison's house. She and her parents were at her soccer game. Found that out later. Her house was 3 lots down the street and on the other side. The house had a 6-foot fence around the property, opening up to the driveway. Whenever she wasn't home, I would just wait for her in the backyard. Her swing set was totally badass. So here I am swinging, waiting for Allison, having a great time. I'm watching through the kitchen window, through the living room, and out the front door, hoping to see her and her parents walk up to the front door. Then I saw a dark, slowly moving figure thing move across the front room. The next few seconds seemed to last years. I am no longer swinging, still sitting on my favorite swing. I am no longer happy. Deathly still I watch this figure, holding my breath as it glides. No, no, no. The voice in my head shrieks as the pitch black shadow stops. Panic is starting to set in my young mind. Hold perfectly still, I tell myself, intently watching as the figure starts to turn towards me. I see no face or any detail, but I feel it as it faces me. Definitely male, definitely full of hate. Every hair feels like it's standing on my head. Scared shitless and not able to move. I tell myself this can't be real. It's almost some waking dream. The thing starts moving towards me. I let out a loud gasp-like scream. I can almost feel its intention. I am frozen by the hate I can feel. I look past the door to the kitchen to the driveway. If that guy comes out of the door at me, I'll never make it past, I think. I look the other way towards the fence. That side doesn't open, but I can climb it. We always did to get to the field. I've never climbed it great, but I can. Looking back at the window, I see the shadow man slide right through the window. I scream as I run towards the field. Never looking back, I climb the fence the fastest I've ever did. Falling off the top of the fence, I land on my back, jump up, and run as fast as I have in my life back to my house. Upon entering my house, I run straight to my room and enter my closet. This is where I sat for the next 4 hours until my parents finally convinced me to come out. To this day, I still get chills when I recall this stuff. Number 1. So this was several years ago, when I was a total deadbeat and I lived with my then girlfriend's parents. They had a tri-level house, with the basement that contained our living space and my girlfriend and I's bedroom. Upstairs was the living space for everyone else, the dining room and kitchen. The third level had the master bedroom and 2 additional bedrooms for my girlfriend's sisters. I was home alone one night, with her parents off with friends, my girlfriend with her friends, and her sisters were at an all-night church thing. I elected to stay home and play WoW all night. Where my computer and desk sat, right above my head, was an AC vent. Often I could hear her sister playing in a room from that vent. I was leveling my paladin or something when I heard laughing and giggling come from the vent. No one was supposed to be at home, so my heart picked up. I glanced at the clock on my computer, and it read 1:36 a.m. I remember this all very distinctly. I went to go investigate and headed upstairs. The way the landing sits is at the top of those stairs. You can turn left and either go upstairs or go into the kitchen. I climbed the second set of stairs and opened the first door on the left, which was her young sister.